On his 72nd birthday, the President of the United States was once again accused of fraud by the New York State Attorney General. The New York State Attorney General, along with two other state attorneys general, accused Donald Trump of fraud in the operations of Trump University. Donald Trump vowed back then to fight that case to the end, but he eventually surrendered and agreed to pay $25 million in fines for the fraud that was Trump University. This new fraud case, the state attorney general of New York says the fraud is the Trump Foundation, which is supposed to be a charitable foundation, but according to the attorney general, has been operated in a, quote, persistently illegal manner, which included improper and extensive political activity, repeated and willful self-dealing transactions, and failure to follow basic fiduciary obligations or to implement even elementary corporate formalities required by law. New York State Attorney General Barbara Underwood is asking the court to dissolve the Trump Foundation, obtain restitution of $2.8 million, and ban Donald Trump from serving on any New York nonprofit boards for 10 years and ban his three children from serving on any charitable boards for 1 year. Attorney General Underwood also referred other possible violations of tax law to the Internal Revenue Service and possible violations of campaign finance law to the Federal Election Commission. The Attorney General called the foundation, quote, little more than a checkbook for Donald Trump, and detailed how the president used it to settle personal lawsuits, like in 2007 when he was sued for the size of a flagpole at his Florida club. Donald Trump settled the case by agreeing that he would donate $100,000 to a charitable foundation. Trump then sent this handwritten note to his accounting staff directing them to take the $100,000 from the Trump Foundation to pay that other charitable foundation. It is against the law to use charitable foundation money to settle personal lawsuits. Attorney General Underwood also said, quote, the foundation ceded control over the charitable funds it raised to senior Trump campaign staff who dictated the manner in which the foundation would disperse those proceeds, directing the timing, amounts, and receipts of the grants. It is illegal to use charitable funds for political purposes. Very little of the money in the Trump Foundation came from anyone named Trump. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in the Trump Foundation came, for example, from contributions by NBC when Donald Trump had a television show on NBC. David Fahrenthold of the Washington Post won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting during the presidential campaign, in which he found Donald Trump's contributions to his foundation to be actually zero for 8 years before the presidential campaign. Now that Donald Trump's being charged with fraud once again by the New York State Attorney General, Donald Trump has once again said, I won't settle this case, exclamation point. Joining us now, David Cay Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who founded DCReport.org. He's the author of It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing in America. And David, let's begin with the prediction that Donald Trump is once again lying when he says, I will not settle this fraud case. There's nowhere else for him to go eventually than settling this case.
Somewhere down the road, Donald will settle this, but I think the filing by the Attorney General of New York today makes it very clear that Donald Trump and his family meet the Justice Department's standards for prosecution for tax crimes. These are multiple offenses over a number of years, so it's not any issue of inadvertence. It's flagrant, and it meets the standard of what is called general deterrence. You prosecute people who will get attention to violations of the tax law to deter others. And it seems to me entirely appropriate, especially given that Donald Trump in the past has confessed to being a sales tax cheat, has had 2 income tax fraud trials. And this also goes to why we need an audit of the inaugural committee and what happened to the $107 million there, and why we need to see Donald Trump's tax returns, which I am absolutely confident will show that he is a serial tax cheater.
I want to get more into what the tax crimes might be, but I also just want to point out this one thing that the Attorney General of New York State has pointed out. She says, among other things, Trump repeatedly signed under penalties of perjury IRS Forms 990, in which he attested that the foundation did not engage in transactions with interested parties and that the foundation did not carry out political activity. And David, just technically, the way you commit a tax crime in this country most of the time is by signing your name. And it is usually to a tax return, but any tax form that you sign can be a tax crime.
That's right. The signature line is what's called a jurat. Wesley Snipes, when he filed his fraudulent tax returns, inserted into the form under no penalty of perjury. And that Donald Trump has done this repeatedly, it goes to something very fundamental about the Trump family. The Trump family is about winning, and it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter what rules you break. It doesn't matter what laws you flaunt. And if we're going to be a country of laws, this case right here absolutely establishes that Donald Trump meets the standards. Now, if you want to follow the Justice Department regulation that you can indict a sitting president, fine. Make him an unindicted co-conspirator or withhold prosecution on him by getting him to agree to toll the statute until he leaves office.
And the referral to the IRS, David, how does that proceed? Is that something that the Internal Revenue Service can just look at from the New York State Attorney General and throw away?
Well, they can if they want to. But what's supposed to happen is the case is supposed to be seriously reviewed, and then the IRS goes to the Justice Department Tax Division, which has rules in place about what to do with referrals and who to prosecute. And I reread all of those today, and they make it very clear that Donald Trump is a prime candidate for criminal prosecution in this matter. Now, I do want to point out that we spend almost no effort in this country to prosecute tax crimes. 160 million individual tax returns in round numbers and about 1,600 tax felony prosecutions a year, most of which are drug dealers and drug traffickers or politicians who took bribes.
Well, we'll see if they have time for Donald Trump. David Cay Johnston, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.